Live?
We're live. Hi, everyone. Ashley and Erica here.
Yes.
So I've survived Thanksgiving, wondering how you all did out there. Ashley and I were just talking about Thanksgiving sort of being the hump of the beginning of the holiday season and kind of seeing how each person managed with their intuitive eating. And I'll just mention that the people that I've been seeing who are a little bit more working on their recovery in terms of their eating disorder have probably had a little bit more of a struggle than people who might be farther along in their intuitive eating. So I do want to just say one thing, and then I'll let Ashley talk about the intuitive eaters. I'll say that if someone is struggling in their recovery, don't hesitate to fall back on your meal plan, even if you're working on intuitive eating, because that's why it's there. It's the fail safe, it's a safety net, and it helps you, even if you're struggling with feelings of hunger and fullness. It just reminds you that this is what you need to do right now. And so there's nothing wrong with going back, even if you've been making progress. There's nothing wrong with having it as a backup. Just had to say that. And Ashley, you were telling me that you were noticing some interesting things with some of the newer intuitive eaters, so I'll let you share that.
Yeah, so I mean, just like Erica said, I think that Thanksgiving is sort of like a good barometer to see where you're at once the holidays start, to sort of gauge how you're feeling around food with the holidays, how much anxiety there is with it. And, I work in a couple of other groups, and one of the things that some of the people in the more strictly intuitive eating groups were noticing was that it actually reduced their anxiety to experience Thanksgiving and sort of see that it's really not that bad. I mean, obviously, we all have our own personal experiences, and yours might be that it was that bad. Mm-hmm. But there were some people who were sort of reflecting on it, and this was their first holiday season as intuitive eaters. They're still new intuitive eaters, but not people struggling with an eating disorder. And they were like, I was surprised to find that after Thanksgiving, I actually felt a little bit better about the impending holiday season because I sort of realized that it wasn't as bad as I thought.
Yeah, that it was just one meal and one experience with your family. Just
right.
Sort of almost like a little bit of a build-up.
Exactly. So that was really encouraging, because it's really nice to sort of see people kind of unpacking their fears around food and realizing that, like, food doesn't. This is something Julie Duffy Dillon says a lot. Like, food doesn't deserve as much power as we give it.
That's very true. Thank you, Julie. It's a good comment.
Yeah, she says if you guys have ever listened to the Love Food podcast, she talks about that a lot in the Love Food podcast. Mm-hmm. And it's a really, I think, big point during this time of year, because it's like there's so much anxiety, whether you're still struggling with your eating disorder or you're moving towards recovery or you're doing intuitive eating. There's so much anxiety about, like, well, what's going to happen during the holidays, because that's such a dieting trigger.
Can I just say something that I've been noticing? You cannot watch a TV commercial now without hearing about a diet plan. Mm-hmm. It really is, and not only that, and hearing the Christmas music. I mean, it's shocking. I just don't even realize what time of the year it is because it's really warm in New York, and I'm driving around and there's Christmas lights. I mean, it just sort of snuck up on us.
It's crazy that it's December 1st.
I know that sounds weird, but it is true. So, yeah.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I think this time of year is always interesting for me because it starts off, my sister's birthday is November 18th, then there's Thanksgiving, then my birthday is November 28th, which sometimes is also on Thanksgiving.
Oh.
And sometimes that's also when Hanukkah starts, because sometimes it starts early in November. I was born on the first night of Hanukkah, fun fact about me. And
what? That's a fact about me too.
Really?
Yes.
When's your birthday?
It's in December.
Okay.
The Jewish calendar, so there you go.
Yeah, it moves. That's so funny.
Spinning dreidels. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so there's Hanukkah in there, and then basically the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas, it's basically Christmas, right? And then it's Christmas, and then it's New Year's, and then it's diet heyday, right? So it's just this really long, like, from Halloween until, like, Valentine's Day. It's just so much.
That is a really very, very good point, that it's from Halloween all the way to February. That's very true. And I want to just say that it's hard not to see and read articles about how to avoid the holiday weight gain,
Yeah.
Don't gain, 20 pounds between this. And I want to just, I know I shouldn't have just said that number, but I want to make a point that this is like sensationalism. It's not, doesn't happen, and it doesn't have to happen.
Well, I mean, but sometimes it does. Like, I remember I read a statistic somewhere, and I'm going to use a number just because it's like the average person gains 1 pound during the holidays.
When my point is that you're going to hear this crazy, I was going to say this crazy shit about, you're going to gain 20 pounds, you're going to gain 50 pounds. That's sensationalism trying to get you to buy the diet. That is what I want people to hear.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is maybe you do gain weight during the holidays. Like, it's fine, It's really not a big deal. But I think that what happens is you have the holiday season, like I was saying, and then you have Thanksgiving, or I'm sorry, you have Valentine's Day, and then all of a sudden it's like spring is coming, get your beach body ready. And it's like,
that's correct.
Eating Christmas cookies. Chill the fuck out.
Correct. Chill the fuck out. I'm going to make a point about that physiologically, which is that your body really likes to stay where it is. And I say this with absolute true conviction. You can overeat for whatever, for a period of time. And what happens is your body actually does increase its metabolism. It's called the thermic effect of food, which is really cool. Like, your body has a place of homeostasis. It likes to stay there, which actually is challenging when someone is trying to work on their weight restoration if they've been in a restrictive type of eating disorder. Your body just likes to stay. So I think people get really freaked out. And the truth is, your body's going to go where it goes with, just work on intuitive eating, whatever quote unquote normal eating is. I'm going to make a point about that, Ashley. There are some newer people in the group, and I think people think, I'm going to just become an intuitive eater. I'm just going to eat whatever the hell I want. And I think some of the doctors that I work with have this notion that all hell's going to break loose. I'm just going to go eat every single thing in the refrigerator, and I'm going to just turn into a blimp. And I want to just say, I know that a lot of people think this way and a lot of doctors think this way. And I'm going to ask you, maybe you can describe a little bit of your experience in the beginning when you were working on your intuitive eating.
Yeah, so it was such a long journey because I was really a disordered eater from the very beginning. And before that, I really used food to cope, which was fine from like a young age. That was just the coping mechanism that I sought out. It made sense. I'm from a Jewish family, and so food is very tied up with love and celebration. And so to turn to food in times of stress made a lot of sense. But then I started to gain weight, and then I was targeted for my body, and all of a sudden using the food became a shameful thing, even though it really shouldn't be.
Can I stop you and say thank you for sharing that? Because I think people really need to hear that it's okay to share the shame that you may feel and the pain you may feel, and that it's really cathartic to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, shame is one of those things. Shame cannot survive in the light, I think is the quote.
I love that one. Yes.
Yeah. So in any case, from there, my eating became very disordered. It was very rebellious. It was driven by a lot of like wanting to defy my parents. And like, I was a very goody two shoes kind of person. Like, I didn't go out, I didn't do drugs, I didn't drink, nothing. But the way I rebelled was through food. And I also had a lot of health issues, which looking back, it was more related to anxiety than what I was eating, but it was said to be about what I was eating because I was in a larger body.
Of course.
So, it got very disordered. And then I had a traumatic incident that really pushed me over the edge, along with all the diet culture I'd grown up with in my house, around me. And then I became very, very restrictive. And it became, at first, it sort of started as like the first diet I had ever successfully done. And then it just kind of spiraled out of control. And at a certain point, probably about 2 years into it, my body was just like, you're not doing this anymore. And I started binging for the first time. Like, I definitely had experienced overeating before then, but this was something far beyond what I'd ever experienced. And it was really scary because I had finally, successfully restricted for so long. And then I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I had finally beaten it, and here I am, it started out as night eating. I would go up in the middle of the night because I was so hungry. Like, I was going to sleep hungry.
Yeah.
come up in the middle of the night and just, tear through the pantry, tear through the kitchen. And it was really, again, very shameful. I would try to like tiptoe and hide all the packages. And
Can I stop you for just 1 second? Because I want to just really normalize what you're describing, because I think that a lot of people who may be watching this have experienced the same thing. And you said it, the body always tells you. If you restrict, your body is smarter than your brain and even the eating disorder thoughts that you may have, because your body needs to survive, and so it's going to look for food. So
and it's also going to look for food that's going to give you immediate energy.
Correct.
What I wanted was like sugar and carbs.
Mm-hmm.
All I wanted was sugar and carbs. And it's funny because like now as an intuitive eater, I really don't have very much of a sweet tooth, like at all. I still really love bread because I like that chewiness, but I don't really love sugar. And that was one of my big things when I was a binge eater was sugar. I loved cookies. Like Oreos. I loved Oreos. Now I eat an Oreo and I'm like, okay. And sometimes I'm like, this kind of tastes like chemical. And sometimes I'm like, an Oreo sounds great. Like it really just depends. But it's so funny just like how your food preferences really change when your shame about the food choice goes away.
Okay, we're going to use that as a quote. That's a quote.
All of these. Anyway, so like I said, I was very restrictive, and then basically my body rebelled and was like, you need to fucking eat. And at that point, I didn't realize I was struggling with an eating disorder. I was just like, well, fuck, I'm failing, like it. And so of course I'd try harder and harder and harder to restrict the day before, and then just end up eating more and more. And the binges sort of spilled into like post-school afternoon snack binge and the nightly binge. And then it was like my whole late afternoon was just basically a binge. And it just sort of extended like that. And so by the time I went off to college, I was in a very tumultuous place. Mm-hmm. And of course, going to college really can trigger a lot of stress responses because it's such a huge transition. A lot of people experience that with depression, anxiety, eating disorders. And for me, it just like, it made everything 100 times worse. Like when I first got to college, I was like, great, new start. It's sort of like coming back to school after the summer. It's like new start. I'm going to do X, Y, Z and lose all the weight I gained back and I'll be fine. But, instead, the sort of erratic thoughts about food just increased. Like not only did my behaviors get more erratic, but my thoughts were so obsessive. Like I incorporated exercise into my daily regimen, which I'm really not an exercise person. I kind of hate it. And like I was reading my textbook on the fucking stationary bike, and not really eating throughout the day. And then there'd come a certain point where I would go down and maybe like get a piece of pizza. And then as soon as that dam broke, like as soon as the wall was cracked, it was like I'd go down multiple times in an evening because I was like, oh, this time's the last time. And then I'd be back down again, right?
I'm just going to say it again. Restrict, binge.
Yep.
Restrict, binge. I mean, the binge could be, overeating, but it's always going to get you. It's going to get you.
And you'd think that we would learn, right? Like, okay, I'm not eating throughout the day, and now all I want to do is eat. Maybe I should eat, right? But because diet culture is so strong, we ignore what our body's literally, like, clearly telling us. And it's like, no, I know better. It's like, no, you fucking don't. So anyway.
Can I just say something? I had someone, I'm just going to share something someone said this to me this morning. It's so interesting. When I wake up and I actually eat breakfast, I don't know why, I'm so much hungrier the rest of the day. And, that kind of says it all. It's like, yeah, because you're listening to your hunger signals.
Funny. That's something that as like a diet or disordered eater, I wouldn't eat breakfast because I noticed that as well. Because when you eat, your metabolism kicks in. Like that's what your body's supposed to do. That means
enzymes wake up.
It has started for the day. Like that's what it's
supposed to your brain.
But if you don't eat, then you don't feel hungry. And for dieters and people who are trying to restrict, that's huge. That's great.
Yes.
Like the longer you can wait to eat, the better. But what ends up happening is if you wait that long to eat, when you finally do eat, it feels so out of control because you're so hungry. And a lot of people experience that too. Like they don't eat throughout the day. And then, that's sort of what I was doing. I was just eating small amounts. But anyway, so eventually, around the spring, I spoke to my mother and I was like, not only was I mean, I also have anxiety and depression, and it was just like this huge storm, all together. And I went home for spring break and I was a mess. Like, I was just a mess. And I was like, I need to see a therapist. I have an eating disorder. Like,
Mhm.
I can't anymore. And so I got a therapist, and she absolutely changed my life. I mean, it took what, 3 years, 3.5 years, but by the time I left college, I was pretty much recovered and exploring intuitive eating.
Look, can I just say something? I just want to make a point. I hope you don't mind. I'm using you as a really good example because you're like rock solid and you're, listen, you've had bumps on the way because that's what recovery looks like. It's not linear. You don't just go like, okay, I'm here and I'm going to go, I'm going to get better. There's lots of little things along the way, but it takes time.
Yeah, and like,
It takes time.
yeah, it takes time. And then, like you said, like, I've had bumps, I've had whatever. Recovery isn't linear. Like, right now, I recently, over the summer, I had some weight gain, and in terms of like my personal ideology, I should be fine with that, but I wasn't. And I sort of realized that I had more work to do in terms of my body image than I had realized. Um,
Mhm.
which sort of this last like couple of months, I've really been thinking about it more, and like I've really been exploring clothing a lot more. And so I've decided to use my Instagram to really showcase like my own body image journey, which is funny because my Instagram is what I first started using when I first started recovery. It was a way to document my recovery. And then after that, it was a way to document my intuitive eating journey. And I've deleted a lot of stuff because a lot of it's could have been pretty triggering and like not helpful, but it was helpful to me at the time. And it's especially helpful to look back and sort of see the progress, because it's really hard with like recovery and intuitive eating to like see your progress because you don't have a number that you can like look at every week and be like,
Very good point. Yes. Can I
so
tell you something? I really enjoyed your Instagram. Follow Ashley's Instagram because she's rocking.
or Saruya.
You're gonna put it onto the bottom because she's really rocking her fashion choices now.
Thank you. Yeah,
Embracing the body image.
I've always loved clothes, but I think this is something most people can identify with who've ever been in a larger body. Like, shopping was such a fucking horror. Like, I cannot even tell you how many, like, going shopping, it was always like, all right, what's your mood like today, Ashley? Because, if you're going to do this, you need to at least be in like tip top shape because it's going to all fall apart, but at least you're starting off better. Like, it was awful. It was always awful. But at the same time, like, I've always felt like I've had this sense of style that I've always wanted to express, but I never felt comfortable enough in my body to do it. Felt like I had the clothing options available to me because my body shape, not only was it my body size, but my body shape. I'm very curvy. I'm very hippie. And so like finding stuff that fits, that like makes me feel comfortable is really hard. Not to mention, like, now I'm officially plus size. So there was a lot of research and like a lot of trips to the post office to return things, like so much just like sending shit to my apartment. It was a fucking process to find, brands that I know I will like and what size I am in them now, and like to figure out. And like now for Black Friday, I went kind of crazy at I bought so much stuff, but everything's been fitting because I did the research. Like, I figured out what size I am in certain stores and which stores work. And so it's a lot of fun when you finally are finding stuff that works.
Can I say something? I'm sorry that I'm using you as an example, and I'm just going to break for a moment and say to people out there, in TV land, everyone is on this journey, really starting from a different place. So as it's turning out, you're finding that your size is moving a little bit into the plus area, and I'm going to actually say that for myself too. But there are some people also who may be on the smaller side who are still struggling with their body image, despite whatever size they may be, even starting to eat more food and even noticing, even if the size isn't changing, just noticing body shape changes. I think it's really very challenging. And again, especially with all the messages we're hearing right now. And I'm going to repeat this again, that looking at all different images of different shapes and sizes of people, and not just women but men, or whatever your sex is, whatever, just looking at variety really changes the brain waves. I've noticed that for myself.
Yeah. I think something in terms of, just to bounce off that, it's not even always about like your size changing. It's sort of similar to what you were saying about shape. I remember when I first started gaining weight, I could feel it. Like, I felt it on my body. My body felt different. And of course at that point I was very sensitive to it. I was very sensitive to what my body looked like and how it felt in a sense of like, did it feel fat? Not in the sense of like intuition. But like I remember I was walking around and I was like, I feel my leg jiggling and it wasn't jiggling before. And that alone like threw me into an anxiety panic. So because I remember when I started gaining weight, I didn't change sizes for a long time. It was a lot of like redistributing.
Well, that's what has to happen, in the early part of recovery, is that, your body tends to want to first deposit a little bit of extra fat around your middle to protect your organs.
Yeah.
People, and that is particularly disturbing when someone's been really working on the thin ideal and have been in a restrictive place. I get it. That is so challenging. And, I always just try to help really explain that it does change. It redistributes eventually.
And the other thing that I want to point out is like, at that point when I was super restrictive, like I had almost lost my period, but I had actually just gotten to the normal BMI range. Right. Okay. So that's, but I mean, BMI is bullshit, but like that just sort of exemplifies like it's funny because like looking back at pictures, I'm like, I look like a bobblehead. Like I did not look like myself, but to everyone else, I looked completely normal. No one was like, Ashley, are you eating? Because I wasn't super, super thin. I've never been super, super thin. I mean, looking back now, I'm like, holy shit, I was thin, but like, it just wasn't to the, like, no one paid any attention because I wasn't emaciated.
You know what? That is the continuing problem. I actually had this talk with I think you're watching, Elise. I had this talk with you earlier about it doesn't matter what a person's weight, shape, whatever, but it's what have you been eating? Are you eating enough food for your body to flourish and to nourish and to flourish? Are you eating? Our society normalizes this dieting behavior, which is normalizing eating disorders.
Right.
Right and left, normalizing eating disorders.
Right. And the other thing I want to point out too, I'm sorry, Erica, I don't even remember your initial question.
So now I forgot what it was, but that's okay. We're like
talking about my own experience.
I forgot what it was too.
Yeah, there's another point that I like to make when I talk about my own story, and that's that I struggled a lot to be recognized as having a real eating disorder, both because of my size and because aside from that like 2-year period, I'd never had a really restrictive eating pattern. It had always been overeating, binge eating, and then when I was really a binge eater, which it's so hard because a lot of people who experience binge eating were restrictive in an earlier point, right? And so it's difficult to say, were you actually anorexic and you were having rebound binges, or were you a binge eater? And that's sort of where like DSM really fails us, right?
I agree, because I think it makes no difference. It's what it makes
no difference. And I think that's sort of my point in that, like, when I was a disordered eater, had an eating disorder, no one actually ever diagnosed me with an eating disorder. I was diagnosed, I think, with generalized anxiety by my therapist. Because I mean, she was one of those that believed that like diagnoses could be stigmatizing, and so she didn't really focus on the diagnosis. Right. But my mother, for example, she's an occupational therapist. She's very science minded, and so she was like, "Well, do you have an eating disorder, or is it just disordered eating?" And I was like, "Does it matter?"
No, yeah.
To her, it did, and that was a huge struggle to sort of be recognized too. So there's this recognition with getting a diagnosis or getting the right diagnosis, right? Because being anorexic versus being a binge eater are they have two different associations attached to those, right?
That's correct.
And then you also have the body size issue. So in any case, that's basically my story. I don't think I've ever shared it, actually.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you for sharing, for being able and letting us see that it's a widespread phenomenon, having eating issues. And I don't think we need to classify it. I think there's a spectrum from disordered dieting, disordered eating, all the way to some sort of eating disorder where it becomes really disruptive and your life is falling apart. And it'd be nice to be able to catch it before that happens.
Yeah, and I also think that one of the things that sort of that can separate eating disorders from other mental health issues. Eating disorders are often rooted in a very perfectionistic type person. It's very common to have that in common. And so very often people who struggle with eating disorders still seem very high functioning, even if they're not in terms of what's going on in their head. Like even if their thoughts are completely consumed by food and body. Like I was an excellent student throughout all of college. You know, I mean, I slacked off because it did nothing interested me, right? Like it was just boring. But aside from that, I was still considered very intelligent. I was still very talkative in class. I was still very outspoken. Like I think that in some ways, yes, an eating disorder can take your personality, but at the same time, I think that eating disorders are very good at tricking you into thinking that you're still there, right? And that like,
can I just say, yes, that is a very big problem for many people that I see.
Yeah.
And the eating disorder talks to them, and it's really the false voice. It's not an accurate perception.
Wrong voice.
Very wrong.
And it feels real. You know, and then when I really found recovery, I really found my voice again. Mm-hmm. You know, and part of that was finding feminism and finding, you know, body politics and, you know, really embracing the political side and the cultural side of eating disorders. That's really where I found my voice.
Can I say something? I'm an interrupter. I'm sorry. What would you say was your first book in terms of finding your feminism that really got you thinking, that made you angry, that really spoke to you?
So, okay, so I just turned 23.
Happy birthday.
And so I consider myself part of the Tumblr generation. My first introduction to feminism was through Tumblr. It was not through a book.
Oh.
Yeah. And first, you know, I'm sorry?
I can't figure Tumblr out, even though I'm sorry. I'm interrupting.
I didn't really use it in the sense that like I just reblog stuff, which is basically like a retweet. I didn't make anything. But people on Tumblr are very social justice minded. Obviously, there's critiques about feminism on Tumblr. It's not perfect. There are problems with it. But as an introduction, it was really great. You know, people will call out a lot of bullshit. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so that was really my first primer with feminism. And that I actually found Tumblr because I was looking for inspiration. So I found Tumblr during my eating disorder. But eventually, you know, I had put Tumblr away. And then eventually I came back to it when I was really recovered and was finding a lot of different accounts that were more about feminism and social justice. And from there, I was looking for recovery resources because my senior year of college was really when I found recovery, but it was still like, I felt like I needed the support, right? And so I had my therapist and I had supportive friends and such, but I was looking for more resources. And I had suddenly stumbled onto podcasts again. I think everyone had sort of suddenly stumbled onto podcasts again at that point. And I found Isabel Fox and Duke and Kristis Harrison. So Kristis' podcast, specifically the episode she did with Melissa Fabello, the very first episode she did with Melissa Fabello, which is like, I think it's episode like 39 or 42. It used to be called Food and Feminism. I don't know what it's called anymore. I think she changed it, but it's still there. It's still there in the archives. It changed my fucking life. Similarly, other episodes with Isabel Fox and Duke were the first one as well, because when I was first listening to it, I was listening to the first one, also was huge. And both of them talk about sociology, feminism, patriarchy, diet culture, beauty ideals, like all of these concepts that really sort of cement this idea that like, this is not your fault. And I think taking that blame off of myself was huge. It really, because growing up, I was such a self-blamey person. Like, I know it's not a technical term, but like, that's what I often do that. It's my fault, right? And with Food and Body, it was like, well, it's your fault. You can't figure it out. It's your fault. You can't do this. And then it was, well, it's your fault. You're struggling with food. right?
The fact is that this is like a very common theme. So I love how you found another source of inspiration for your recovery. I love that. And I love
And
people to hear that.
yeah, and I think that social media can be really helpful for that. Like I'm trying to think. I mean, the reason I do this work is because I found Kristy on Twitter. Like that's how I got my job with Kristy, which is how I got my job with you. Like that's how I did this. And when you're sort of operating on the fringes of society, when you're operating sort of outside the normal paradigm, or I'm sorry, not the normal paradigm, the status quo. When you're operating outside the status quo, sometimes you have to get a little creative and search for spaces that you wouldn't normally come across just organically, right? So I started blogging and I started posting my blog on every social media site I could, and using the hashtags like ED recovery and health at every size and feminism and intuitive eating and all the stuff that I had sort of started exploring. And I really, I dug myself into it. And that's very common too. Like people with eating disorders can be, or who have had eating disorders can be very obsessive. And so sometimes that, that obsession can transfer. And so my obsession did sort of transfer to recovery a little bit, but I think that's common. And that's part of the process.
It's what you needed at the time. That's all.
Exactly. And so, and a lot of really wonderful things came out of it. And I think that it's important to sort of be conscious and know that you don't need to get stuck there. Like that's not the end point. But it is, I think, part of the process for most people to really immerse yourself in the body of language that is anti-diet, right? Because there's so much to unlearn. And you've spent, I was 20 at the time, which is young for most people to come across this stuff, to be quite honest. Like I was lucky. Most people, they're in their 30s, their 40s. And so think of how many years you've had, or 50, right, and more. And so that's however many years of being saturated by diet culture with no one intervening, right? And so there's so much to unlearn. Like it's not even always necessarily about learning new things. It's about unlearning the old things.
Can I just say, absolutely. And for me, I find one of the biggest struggles is really getting other health professionals, like the doctors that I might refer my clients to.
Sure.
I'm fortunate to have therapists who really understand this paradigm shift, but to really understand that we have to unlearn diet culture, that you cannot tell a person with a binge eating problem to go on a diet, which is a tremendous trigger. And it makes me sorry, but it makes me, I know it makes you crazy.
Yeah, it's upsetting. And it's also, it's one of the reasons why I didn't get help for so long, because it's just like, it's just, people would look at me and say, oh, you could lose a few pounds. Like, it's fine, or like when I had those health issues, which were really about anxiety, I went to a lot of endocrinologists who were notorious for being weight biased. And, there was this one guy who was highly recommended by someone in our community who had used him to like help diagnose her daughter with something that had been like a mystery for so long. And we went to the doctor. All my blood work came back fine because I was fine. And
whatever size or shape you were fine.
Had anxiety, but like physically I was fine. And he looked at my mother and he was like, she's just fat.
Yeah, we can go on this way. Yeah, blame everything on being fat.
Right. And to my mother's credit, because she was super diet focused, really has a lot of body image issues, had herself. And so like there was a lot of stuff that she did that contributed to it. But to her credit, with this doctor, she was so outraged. She was like, we are fucking leaving. Like, this is not okay. Like, she was so upset. And I think, part of it was I've been going to doctors for so long and no one could find out what was wrong with me. And clearly something was wrong. It just wasn't physical. And, it was like to sort of get poo-pooed like that, which of course women also are very often. We talked about this in a previous Facebook Live. I think really struck a chord with her.
Well, the times, they are changing.
They are.
They are changing.
It's true. And I think that, social media is to credit for some of that. Like I said, when you're on the fringes of society, like in order to be heard, you sort of have to often go to social media, which is one of the things social media is great for. Obviously, it has its downsides as well. But it's really one of the ways that I think that the Health at Every Size community and the weight neutral eating disorder recovery community has been able to come together and really be loud and proud. Like we went to Beta a couple weeks ago, and it was just like haze everywhere. Like it was great, and like it wasn't a strictly haze conference. There were clearly issues, but like all of us were there.
And I'm going to make a point that not everybody watching this even knows what haze is. Haze is health at every size, understanding that there's body diversity. We come in all shapes and sizes, and that health is not measured by our body weight. And that health is actually not even a requirement. We do the best we can. I'm just going to leave it there.
Yeah, and a Health at Every Size, jumping off that, is political, right?
Very political.
Yeah, and I think that that's something we need to say at the outset more, because I think a lot of people come into Health at Every Size and they're like, yeah, I'm on board with this. Like, I could totally, rationalize this with science, and I think the science is there, right? But as soon as you start adding political stuff into it, like talking about feminism and talking about beauty ideals and talking about patriarchy and the way that diet culture fucks with us, right? And how other intersections, racism, ableism, homophobia, all these things intersect with this problem too. Like as soon as you start talking about that, people will back off and be like, I don't want to get political. And it's like, no, this movement is inherently political. Body positivity is inherently political. It was started by fat activists. So
I'm going to make a point, though. I just want to say for the people out there who are watching, if you're just in early recovery.
Oh yeah, I'm a little radical, so don't let me scare you.
I'm the eating disorder recovery, and you are the activist right now in this conversation. So to the people who are struggling in their recovery, just use your meal plan. Listen to your team. Listen to your team. Don't worry about all this other stuff. You have so much time. But I'll just say, I've learned so much from this one right next to me.
I mean, to me, I know that a lot of people have are resistant to being political, and that's fine. Everyone has their own process. I think these things are inherently political, but I also personally would still have an eating disorder if I didn't learn all of these things. Because again, taking the blame off of me and understanding that like this wasn't my fault, but it was my responsibility, right? I don't know who said that quote, but I think about it a lot. And
I want you to say it again.
It wasn't your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Well, to recover.
Right, to do what you can for yourself, right? Yeah. You did not put yourself in this situation, okay? Diet culture did, patriarchy did, all the other intersections that you personally faced did. That's what put you there. It's not your fault, right? And, diet culture victim blames us all the time. And understanding that fact that it wasn't my fault, but that I could do something different.
Yes.
So liberating.
Yes. Can I just say it's as liberating as someone just finding intuitive eating, like, oh my God, I don't have to be on a diet. Like, I don't have to be on a diet.
Exactly.
So everyone, I'm just saying, because everyone watching this is kind of in a different place on their journey, and I just want to make that point.
Yeah, but it's like a whole new world.
The idea is liberation. That's the idea. Liberating yourself from your eating disorder, working towards embracing intuitive eating and listening to your body, and then, you know what? Getting political about it. Yes.
And I think, for everybody who is either a chronic dieter or has an eating disorder, there's a root issue that needs to be addressed, right? For me, it was a lot of trauma. It was a lot of oppression. It was a lot of stuff that like I had to address in terms of how has society put me in this position, and without that piece, I don't know that I would have had I don't want to say like strength or resiliency, but like it requires a lot of effort to recover.
Oh my goodness, absolutely.
Effortful.
But I want to say this as a message of hope. People recover.
People
recover every day. I mean, that's why I do what I do. The best job in the world. People recover. We have to offer hope. It's the holiday season.
But I was getting to hope, Erica. I was getting
back.
It is hard. And to get through it, you need resources. You need to get pissed the fuck off. like anger is very energizing. No, I don't think you should be angry your whole life because anger can also be draining, but it can really bolster
And
you.
not angry at yourself. Not angry at yourself for, blowing the diet. Not angry at yourself for not doing intuitive eating correctly. Not blaming yourself for struggling and falling back on your eating disorder. The idea is to get angry that this is the world that has caused this to happen, to let the blame go and work on, okay, this word, I'm going to just say this word makes me a little bit crazy, self-care, because I'm sorry, but what the fuck does self-care mean? I'm going to write a blog on self-care. Bottom line, treating yourself like you would your best friend or your child, really taking care of yourself in every way, physically, emotionally.
Yeah. And that brings us to self-compassion, which I think is another cornerstone of recovery.
Absolutely.
And, so getting really fucking angry, looking at the different systems that are in place that like really got you here, and then really embracing self-compassion and understanding that like none of this is your fault, but you can do something about it. And you can recover or break free from dieting, whichever one applies to you. And like there are examples of it everywhere. And remember that like, this is something that I in my own recovery have sort of had to remind myself, right? Like I am recovered. And just because I had that, I wouldn't even consider it a slip up, right? It was a stressful period where I had a stressor, in this case, weight gain, which is a huge stressor for anyone who's experienced food and body issues. I had a stressor that triggered a very old and easy coping mechanism for me. It triggered thoughts. It didn't trigger behaviors. I noticed those thoughts and I struggled with them. And then I was like, so now what should I do? Right? And that's what recovery is. It's not never having those thoughts, because we live in diet culture. You will always have those thoughts. You'll probably sometimes still want to lose weight. Even
I said this to one of my clients sitting opposite me yesterday. Like, she was talking about, can she be body positive? Can she embrace her recovery and still want to lose weight? And she has a little, and I said, of course you want to lose weight. I would like to lose weight, but I could have that thought for a moment, but I still eat normally. I still exercise in a way that makes my body feel good, because I live in this world where it's impossible to not hear it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a nuance in there. This is something that body positive communities talk about, because it's like, can you lose weight and consider that a body positive action?
Yes. No.
But
intentional weight loss.
You can still have that want, because we live in this world. Of course, you're going to have that want, but still be body positive in your actions.
And take that desire and just put it to the side. Just know it's there. Let it just sit there.
And like, don't be on yourself for having that thought. You can have it. Like,
yes,
it's just what you do with it. What you do with it is what matters.
Yes.
There's another quote. I don't know if it's a quote or it's just like one of those things that people say, but it's like, your first thought is what society has conditioned you to think. Your second thought is what reflects you as a person and what matters. So on that note, I have to go to prayer.
Yes. It's a very good note to end on, to wrap up our conversation in a little bow and say happy holidays to everyone. We're not disappearing. We'll be doing another Facebook Live.
Post your questions throughout the week. We'll be here next Friday.
And just so people know, Ashley and I, we love doing this together. And to that extent, we're going to be having another round of, what do I call them? Nutrition support group in January. And it is on my website. You can look and you can sign up, and we'll let you know when it starts.
Come join us every week.
And come and do my intuitive eating program. It's excellent. You'll learn more about how to change your thoughts, which can help then change your actions, thinking about what's really matters, what's important, your true values. And on that note, have a lovely rest of your day.
Happy holidays, y'all.
Bye. Thank you.